Hey everyone. Today's conversation is about recruiting. It's the perception of independent contractors, consultants versus being in-house. It's a conversation about what do trends look like, especially in the life sciences. So if you're in medical affairs, if you're legal, if you're an attorney, you care about today's discussion. Our guest today is actually quite special. He is Stuart Tenhoor. He's an FDA lawyer, placement expert. He's actually adding new talent to his team. So if people are interested in recruiting, please talk to Stuart as well. My name is Darshan Kulkarni. This is the Darshan Talks live stream. And I'm an attorney. I'm a pharmacist, and I advise companies with FDA regulated products. I do have to say I'm an attorney, but I'm not your attorney. I'm a pharmacist, but I'm not your pharmacist. So this is neither legal advice nor clinical advice. These are considerations. They don't necessarily reflect the opinions of the host, the guest, or our employers or clients. So if you like what you hear, please leave a comment, please subscribe and share. Please feel free to reach out, ask our guest questions. You can always find me on Twitter at DarshanTalks. Go to our website at DarshanTalks.com. You can always reach Stuart via email at stuart@stuarttenhoor.com. And that's Stuart at StuartTenhoor.com. And Stuart, good to have you. How are you?
I'm doing very well, Darshan. Thanks a lot for having me again. This was a follow-up to our discussion maybe 4 or 5 months ago now. That was something I really enjoyed, so I appreciate you asking me on again.
I appreciate you coming on. It's so much fun to actually talk to people, learn more about things that are going on in the industry. You just told me, for example, that you participated in the JP Morgan conference. How was that?
Yeah, that was a very interesting, as it is every year, conference. I think one of the things I've learned over the years is probably, I don't know, half of the FDA partners that I work with they all know about it, but maybe half of them attend. It's kind of amazing. It's a great place for them to meet prospective clients. And one of the things I learned there was just the outrageous pace of transactions and business related, I guess, different types of business matters that are very rife on many law firm agendas for getting things done. The end of the year was just kind of amazingly busy. Maybe that's tapering off a little bit, but nobody was sure. So there's still a lot of activity, I know.
So I have to ask this question as someone who's affected by what you just said. When you use the term FDA partners, what does that mean to you? Because to me, that means someone who actually deals with FDA regulatory issues. But that's not always a definition. I've seen some people use that term to mean anyone who works in the FDA space. So that a securities lawyer who works with FDA companies, FDA regulated companies, would also be classified into FDA partners. So when you use the term, what did you mean?
Yeah, I'm focused on FDA regulatory there. I would say if you went into a database I use, which is Firm Prospects, there's probably, if you just did a search, maybe there's 800 or 1,000 lawyers that say basically that I do FDA work, but probably 25 to 35% of them are FDA regulatory. They focus on regulatory. And of course, in the transactional space, there's a lot of regulatory work that's part and parcel to closing a deal.
So you're right. I mean, I'm working on multiple transactions that use this. You use my FDA expertise, but it's not a hardcore FDA perspective. It's informed by the FDA perspective. If you are a new lawyer, and I get these questions all the time from law students graduating, do you think this is an area people should be focusing on? Should they go get their chops in FDA regulatory work, or should they become partners in mergers and acquisitions, which is a broader field that they might be able to get potentially more clients from? So how do you advise them?
Yeah, that's a very fair question. My advice is, if you love this space, if you love life sciences, maybe there's something, maybe you've had a medical condition growing up that kind of pushed you into thinking about life sciences, and you have that kind of orientation, then go into FDA regulatory law. There's something called the Food and Drug Law Institute. which has a group called New to Food and Drug Law. And I probably addressed the original meeting of that group back in 8 years ago now. It's a great group. There's probably 500 people in it now. And many of those are law students who don't know exactly what they're going to do, but they're exploring, as you should as a law student. I mean, people explore first, second, third year after graduation from law school, and they explore life sciences. Maybe they get involved in some type of litigation that has to do with a pharmaceutical company. There's a lot of crossover that I've seen over the years where people have gone from anything life science related to drilling down on the FDA regulatory space. I know a person who's actually starting work this month who had no prior work experience as an FDA lawyer and was able to make the transition to go to a very good FDA practice without any FDA regulatory experience. She just had a strong desire to do that. She was doing some independent reading in the space. She was very motivated, but that's rare. She was, I think, 4 or 5 years out of law school. And that's what law firms look for, is people with great credentials and some drive to excel in a certain area. And so she's rare. Not many people could have made that transition. So I think getting early exposure to that FDA regulatory space, gives you a better handle on whether you like it.
And you've done this for several years. Do you find that the space has sort of ebbed and flowed, or is it been more of a steady kind of role? And the reason I ask that is one of the prime examples of feast and famine are either the PI attorneys, the personal injury attorneys, or the bankruptcy attorneys, who have really big highs and really big lows. Have you found that food and drug law tends to be consistent? There's always work coming in. How does that play out?
Yeah, kind of a funny story that illustrates the point. In 2008, it was when the financial crisis occurred, which affected a lot of lawyers. A lot of people come out of law school, couldn't get a job right away. And then well-known firm Latham & Watkins, they laid off over 100 associates in one day. And that was a chilling effect, of course. It spread across the industry, and it took years for that to come back. But later that month or the next month, I watched the NBC News from 6:30 to 7, and half the advertisements were from drug companies and food companies. And I said, light bulb went off, and I said, wow, maybe food and drug law is the place to focus. And so since that time, I placed at least 50 FDA lawyers during that period since 2008. And I think it does demonstrate that there is a strong demand for FDA lawyers. It's kind of, when do we not have drug companies or food companies? I mean, if all else melts down, we're all going to take medication and eat if we can. So in your experience, is it better, and we sort of hinted this topic a little bit earlier, is it better to work in-house within a drug company or a food company, or is it better to work in a law firm, develop those skills across multiple clients? What have you found to be what clients are desiring? Well, I think clients like to see well-rounded experience. If you're an FDA lawyer, having worked at the agency for a couple of years is a great pedigree to have. And I think many FDA lawyers try to do that. I think every law firm that is at a dog and pony show for a prospective client likes to be able to trot out a few folks that have worked at the agency before. Just adds credibility to the advice they give. And I think going in-house is a great experience. Really, all these things, just having a little bit of any of those three, as long as you're getting the kind of work experience that you like. If you're enjoying the job, if you're learning new things, if you're becoming valuable for your clients. One of the things I've said over the years for the law firm partners I work with is, as long as you have a client, you'll always have a job. So I just think that that's whether you're working at the FDA or the Department of Justice or EPA, it doesn't matter. You still have clients and you're still trying to give good service. And you're going to carry that with you throughout your career, no matter where you got your training.
To me, that's really interesting. But one of the questions that pops out for me as a result of it is I did my clerkship probably about 2005. I did a federal clerkship at that time.
Yeah, well, that's great.
Yeah. My question for you is I haven't done much litigation after that. That was my entire litigation experience.
Right.
Some perfunctory stuff, but nothing I'd consider noteworthy. Is it something where you go that experience needs to be current? For example, someone who's worked at the FDA, do they need to demonstrate that they've kept their knowledge current 5, 10, 15 years after the fact? Or does that pedigree carry with them when you're placing people?
Yeah, I think it carries with them. I think having understanding of litigation really informs everything you do as a lawyer. Because having that experience, understanding the litigation process, you can flag the issues, you can see where it's going if a client makes a mistake. So you've seen that multiple times through litigation, whether it ended up in court or was settled out of court. No matter what the experience, you understand that better than somebody who's never done litigation. And I think one of the great maxims I still remember from my first couple of years in practicing law was, if you're preparing for a trial and you think it's going to settle, you're going to go to trial. But if you prepare like you're going to go to trial, it's going to settle. And I think that's probably true, because having that understanding is so important. And I think some of the law firms I've observed over the years have not necessarily been their highest FDA has not necessarily been their highest performing sub-practice, but it does involve high-level contacts within companies. So if a company comes in one morning, you're in the office or on a Zoom call with the major player in that company, and they just got sued, or they're looking for just got word that they're going to do some type of acquisition, they're able to spin off work to other lawyers at the firm that do transactional or white collar compliance enforcement, that type of work. And it's great, because that's the bread and butter of law firms, or transactions and litigation.
So what I hear you saying is that the FDA lawyer, the Food and Drug lawyer, becomes almost a hub for clients to filter work through to other partners. So the value of the lawyer themselves is not in the practice, but in what the practice sort of offloads, if you will. Is that fair?
I think that's overstating it a little bit. I think both are valuable. I think having that FDA regulatory basis, understanding and experience is valuable. Not every firm is going to be able to take care or take advantage of that expertise and get different types of transactions or litigation. I think the more robust your FDA practice, the more likely it is that will happen.
So you've now landed in a scenario where we're talking about someone having this broader base. I'm now thinking about this fictional. So when you go to law school, as you know, everyone talks about the reasonable person. That's the standard everyone sort of goes through. My question is, ignore the reasonable person. Let's assume the reasonable law student who's graduating. Would you say that it's good practice for the reasonable law student to probably take their first job in government to get those chops together, if you will, to sort of understand how the agency of some kind, so whether it's the food FDA, whether it's CDC, whether it's something else, how that operates, then going in, maybe working as outside counsel, and then going inside counsel? Is that the general trajectory, you think?
I think
Go ahead.
Any trajectory that presents itself to you that you find satisfying and challenging is the right trajectory. If you get a great job as a law clerk like you did, that can spin off all types of opportunities, because gives you a basis of understanding of litigation. But I do think that whether you get that first job in the government or a private law firm or a company, that any of those are fine. That necessarily may result in you're lacking certain types of experience, but then maybe that in-house perspective that you had is very valuable going to a law firm. I've seen that happen a lot. I mean, actually, probably 75% go from a law firm to a company, maybe more. Fewer go from a company to a law firm. But the folks that have been very successful in law firms, a lot of times they built great relationships while they were in a company. And then they go to a good law firm that has a good group that they work in, and they enjoy that type of work. And then their colleagues from that in-house roles have a complex problem and they reach out. So that works out well for those folks. And I think, if you look at the FDA itself, there's different centers, and there's a medical device center, Centers for Devices and Radiological Health, and there's CBER, I guess, Centers for Biologics. Anyway, so there's these focus could be, CIFSAN, food, drugs, or devices. And I think depends on the expertise that's needed in a law firm. But if you've got, a number of years at one of the centers or in the chief counsel's office, then that makes you pretty versatile going into a law firm or going into a company. I had a company recently hired a person who had both device and drug experience, and they found him super valuable. They were really looking just for device experience, and they were so excited they ended up, looking at the fact that this person also brought drug experience.
So interesting. So what are the other unique things, the unique perspectives you get to have because of your specialty, your focus, is this conversation on what are the Spinoff areas that people are now starting to ask about. And I'll give you an example. In my case, in my practice, what I found myself doing is I can't just be a food and drug lawyer anymore. I find that I'm required to have a very decent understanding of privacy law. I'm required to have a very decent understanding of intellectual property. Can I practice as a privacy lawyer? Probably not the best idea for me to go out and completely take over a privacy practice, but I work and operate close enough to understand what those areas are, to be able to go, okay, we need to pull in someone who's an expert in this area, but I can do block and tackle work in that area. In the area of intellectual property, I can tell you what a patent is, what a trademark is. I can go through agreements that refer to this. What have been some areas that you've seen gathering more interest in as you start placing people?
Yeah, you hit on two of them. I mean, definitely the privacy issues are huge in the device space, because so many of these devices are, speaking to each other, or, transmitting information to each other. And if somebody hacks that, that has profound ramifications. So to be able to have a privacy person, a specialist on your team who understands those issues is critical. You have to get your device approved, and, the FDA has some very sophisticated people, and the folks at CDRH would, really drill down on that to make sure that's all covered before they give approval for a device. And intellectual property too. I mean, certainly a number of lawyers I've worked with over the years, they've had that IP experience. They have the patent and trademark bar. And there's so often that, you're protecting your intellectual property a lot of times. And that's what, creates value in a company, is the intellectual property that they have. I mean, I've seen in the last 2 years, maybe 3, Amazon and Apple have entered the device space big time. They've hired device lawyers. That's because they want to come up with more devices that, have the privacy protections and, get their customers, super satisfied with what the new devices are able to do.
So, but those are the two. Are you seeing other ones? Like, one of the questions I have, for example, is, as far as I know, I'm the only real food and drug lawyer who's focusing on transparency. I'm sure there are others. I just haven't met them. I've heard conversations, but no one really talking about cybersecurity law. Like I know people talking about privacy, but no one going cybersecurity.
Yes.
Like, are these areas you've heard conversations about, or people are going, you know what, I need someone more block and tackle, more consultant in that area?
Well, in the food and drug space, there are a lot of consultants, sometimes non-lawyers.
Yeah.
There's several that are well known in DC that have a number of ex-FDA lawyers in them. And they're able to do this work, at a lower cost. Their hourly rates are less. So they may be contacted by a law firm to do some specialized stuff. There's a lot of smaller shops that their billable rates are lower, and law firms need that expertise. So they go out and get it. So if there's a transaction that has a cybersecurity bent or a privacy bent, they're able to find people out there. I'm sure people have found you for your expertise,
yes.
To handle things like that.
So another area that I've always struggled with, and I hate to admit it, but it's true, and it's one of those things that I have to get over mental limit and sort of work on this, has been this area of actual healthcare. I found myself practicing purely food and drug law with bends into these other areas. Do you know, or do you find it unusual, or is it very usual for people with food and drug practices to actually have a very deep understanding of how healthcare law works? So having a deep understanding of Stark, or having a deep understanding of anti-kickback outside the life sciences. Because I've seen things like ECRA come up and that kind of stuff, which is more like more health than life sciences. Is that unusual to have that combination of skill sets, or is that now the norm?
I mean, that's a very good question, because I think a lot of firms in particular that don't have FDA experience, but they have healthcare, they sort of, if they hire some FDA people, they put them in the healthcare group.
Right.
And there isn't necessarily an interface between those two. They can be very separate. But certainly, anti-kickback, pharmaceutical companies and healthcare companies has some of the same type of intellectual property that they're trying to protect. So, whether you're working for a healthcare entity or a food and drug entity, it doesn't really matter. That expertise that you have can fit in both situations. So I think, companies, when they hire folks, depending on the size of their legal department, might get somebody that only focuses on that type of area. And then they try to keep them busy, of course, and use them in other capacities.
So as we start exploring the future, where do you think the next areas of interest are going to be? We talked a little bit about these. How should I put this? We talked a little bit about privacy. We talked a little bit about intellectual property. We talked about cybersecurity. Do you see emerging areas that are cracks in that no one's ever going to explore, but that are now popping up? And I'll give you examples. Are you seeing people talking about, say, VR, expertise in VR and software agreements? Are you seeing expertise in I don't know. I'm thinking of VR. I don't know why I thought of VR, but VR might be an example of it. Writing software agreements. Do you think you're seeing that yet, or is that still too premature? What are the areas that are overlapping?
I mean, it's kind of interesting. 20 years ago, there were a lot of law firms that didn't have any intellectual property capabilities. They had no lawyers, so everybody went out and absorbed a boutique if they could.
Yeah,
and then. I don't know, probably 5 years ago, there were plenty of law firms that didn't have any cybersecurity experts. And now everybody touts how deep their bench is in cybersecurity.
Is that true? I didn't know that, actually. Interesting.
Yeah, I think if you look at food and drug law, when the Biosimilars Act was passed, everybody thought, well, biosimilars is the next great frontier. So everybody and their brother was trying to add biosimilars talent. In the early stages, there just wasn't that much demand. But, increasingly every year, more biosimilars are approved. So,
Right.
there's greater work in that area. And then I think, the Hatch-Waxman area, that's well established. But I think the $64,000 question is, as more branded companies purchase generics, or generics, very large generics might pick up a branded acquisition, some type of company that does that work. The question is for conflicts purposes, because the generics don't generally like the branded and the branded don't like the generics. So if you have a practice that focuses on branded, you're not going to hire food and drug lawyers that do generics. And to some degree, vice versa, but maybe less so. So that, as you sort of thread the needle as a practitioner, you got to look at your commitments in that area and see whether you can do both. I mean, it sort of limits you if you're moving laterally to looking at companies that only represent the brands. But again, it's in flux. It's like waves on a very violent sea. They go in both directions. You don't really know.
It's interesting. I have Kip Hanks, who actually messaged this in. 351 versus 361 HCTP issues is really in need of experienced attorneys. IND BLAs filed through CBER need more attorneys. Need experience in 600 820s, 211s, and 1271s. I'm going to be honest, I have no idea what 600 820s, 211s, and 1271s are, but I've worked through the other two. I've had clients who have dealt with the question of 361 HCTPs and whether it's quote-unquote minimally manipulated. So that's always fun. IND BLAs through CBER is, pretty much bread and butter kind of work. But I thought this was kind of interesting to just get a perspective. Have you seen that need, or have you found that to be a bit of a niche there?
No, that's a new one on me. I haven't seen that particular. I'm not an FDA lawyer, so I don't know. But I have to pick up the lingo to effectively do my job. So I know a lot about this area, but that's not an area I can't offer any help to that person.
Well, or they might be able to reach out to you, and you might be able to tell them some people who might be the right fit once, if that becomes an area that's gaining.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly something we can search for. Again, there might be 5 people, there might be 100, there might be 2. Maybe it's the next biosimilars. Who knows?
Yeah. Stuart, this was amazing. Thank you again so much for coming on. As you know, I'm going to ask you a few questions. Kip, thank you so much for asking questions as well. We appreciate technically making a comment. We appreciate it. Stuart, I do have, as you know, a couple of questions I'm going to ask you. So the first question, I do want to point this out, is the answer to that. The answer I've put up already, but what is the best way for people to reach you?
Yeah, my email. I'm on LinkedIn too. Just go to Stuart Tenhoor. We have a pretty robust LinkedIn page, and pretty robust website is just stuarttenhoor.com.
Yep.
So I have different recommendations on there. People that have used our services before, I've worked with them, so they're very kind people who have offered to give some testimonials.
Kip was kind enough to clarify. I can't show that. Whoops. Hold on.
Yeah. Okay.
There you go. He clarified, and 211 is pharmaceuticals, 820 is devices, 600 is biologics, and 1271 is human tissue. I've never seen it actually broken up like that. I usually just deal with the issues. But fair point. Overall, I think what Kip's basically saying is all of it needs more attorneys, and I think that's probably fair.
I'd love to talk about it. I mean, there's certainly a demand for. There's just not enough FDA lawyers right now, to be honest. That's why the demand is high. So I'd be happy to talk to whomever's taking that time to put that in the chat there. Absolutely.
And Kip, feel free to reach out to Stuart, because that it's awesome that you're reaching out and commenting. So thank you for that. So let's ask another question. What's something you, Stuart, would like to ask the audience?
Yeah, I'm just curious, when you think about a job change, do you think about a recruiter immediately? Do you go on Indeed or LinkedIn? How do you approach? What do you do when you start to think, maybe I should switch jobs? It's interesting in my business because I think half the people I call are not necessarily in the market the day I call them. But I'm able to kind of paint a picture of an opportunity that might be a move up, to to help them better their career. So
I'll answer the question. I'm not in the market, but I'll tell you the answer to the question the way I would have answered this. I think it starts from the area of, I start from, do I really want another job? That's usually when if there's dissatisfaction. And that's usually when recruiters seem to catch your interest. Before that, you just delete the emails. But then there's a point where I'm open to ideas. I don't know what those ideas are, but I'm open to exploring. The right recruiter at the right time, if they get you, then there's a conversation worth having.
I call that open for opportunity. I say if in good faith, you're willing to go to a job interview in good faith. In other words, if it bowls you over, you think it's great, you could imagine yourself accepting a job, then yes, you're in good faith. But if you're like, nah, I'll go talk to him, but I'm not really that interested, I don't see that as good faith, and I think you should just wait until you're really ready.
I think that's true. I think the second stage for me at that point is, how can I look for a job without scaring my employer?
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm happy, but I don't want, if there's a round of layoffs coming, I don't want to be high on that list because they think I'm already 1 foot out the door. So that would probably be the next level of
I was actually talking to a guy today, and one of the things I said about that issue is, when you this person had actually come to look at another option 2 years later, because his current firm found out he was looking, had another job offer, and said, hey, we'll shift the type of work that we put you in to make you more satisfied. And then that happened, but he still wasn't that satisfied. Still weren't able to do it as fully. So, he was willing to look at an option again a year later, and sort of the seat of the pants analysis of a bunch of recruiters I heard when I first got into business is, if you accept a counter offer, which he did in that case, his firm said, "Oh, stay. We'll do better by you." 90% of those people are gone in a year, and that seems like an incredibly high number to me. And I've seen people that have stayed, 10 years after that happened. But a lot of people do leave because the fundamental issue that got them out there looking at a job option didn't go away.
So why do you think people stay then?
Because it's hard to move. You have to familiarize yourself in a new place. People are like, they're kind of playing to your ego and saying, hey, you're so valuable, man, or woman, or whomever. You're just so valuable. We need to keep you. What can we do to do that? I've seen that in the FDA space. All last year, people were getting retention bonuses, significant amounts of retention bonuses.
Here's a comment. I was with the FDA for 24 plus years, started with Patrick Stone, wasn't looking to leave. Then a vacancy with the American Association of Tissue Banks was shared with me. Perfect fit. So sometimes such things happen. Luckily, didn't have to go through formal recruiting. I think that was Kip. As you can tell, I can't really tell every time when people are actually responding, but thank you.
That's a great story. I love that story. My counter to that would just be, you don't know what else was out there then if you only looked at that option. And maybe it's the best, but you just don't know until you explore other options. And that's what, I do as a recruiter, is I've got the options. I'm aware of them right now.
Do you find that? So I'm sorry, I'm well past time. I'm going to ask this question, but I've had recruiters say that to me, which is, I'm choosing a bunch of options. I'm picking the one that's right for you. But I as the person being recruited, I don't know what those other options are. I might be a better fit for some of the things you thought I wasn't a good fit for.
Yes.
So what is the better way to have that open dialogue to go, what else do you have on your table?
Yeah, I think you got to vet your recruiter, and not all recruiters do everything. I mean, I have more law firm jobs than in-house jobs. There's some people that do only in-house or almost only in-house. So I might have a couple and they might have 5 or 6 or 7. But I think, know your recruiter. Don't just take the first call and jump on the first opportunity. Do your research, talk to, recruiters are calling people all the time. build a relationship. Maybe you have 3 people. It's just like if you're going to, redo your kitchen, are you going to take the first contractor that shows up? You want to analyze, take time to, vet the different options and go with one. And I think a good recruiter will have more than one option for you.
Great advice. I'm going to ask one last question because we're well past time. But Stuart, what is something most people don't know about you?
It's a good question. I'm a big basketball fan. I played basketball in college. I won an NCAA postgraduate scholarship for basketball, which a lot of people don't even know exists. But I was pleasantly impressed because I was looking a few years ago. I was just Googling that, and I said, "Oh, I can still find it on the NCAA website." But my college was Alma College. It was an A. There was another college with an A. It was called Arizona. And the guy that won the NCAA scholarship from Arizona in like 1989, whatever it was Steve Kerr, who's now the coach of the Golden State Warriors. So I'm always hoping to run into Steve Kerr somewhere and say, "Hey, we have something in common. we're both in the A's under NCAA postgraduate scholarship winners."
That's very, very interesting. I will admit I know nothing about basketball. I know very little about most like basketball, football, or hockey. So I admit to be completely ignorant. But I know about the NCAA, and that sounds really, really, really impressive. So kudos to you. My sports are like that one. That one? No, the other one. That one.
What was that? What is it?
I was U.S. number 2, India number 3 in judo. So I was a fighter.
That's awesome. That's amazing. That's so great.
So that was fun. But that was really unusual. I had not heard that about you. Very, very interesting. Stuart, any last parting words before we go?
I just encourage everybody that's listening who's thinking about, am I in the best place right now? Think about it for a while. Don't just knee jerk one day when you have a really bad day. But start to think about it. Talk to some recruiters, do your research. I mean, the great thing about the internet is you can find out tons of stuff about all types of employers that employ life science attorneys. So do your research, and if you talk with a good recruiter, then you'll be able to vet some of your ideas about a certain place, and hopefully they'll have more background information about any prospective employer that you could be interested in.
Awesome. Thank you again.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Darshan. Always a pleasure.